This is a Film Stories original podcast. Welcome back everybody to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host Tony Black, as ever, and this is the second episode of our second season of the Xcast, where we're going to be covering The Host. But before we get to that, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome back a season 1 guest who came on last time to talk the amazing Beyond the Sea. It's Mr. Clarence Moy. Hello again.
Hey Tony.
So how have you been since we recorded Beyond the Sea, which I think was around April time, something like that?
Yeah, it was about April around there, and just working on Awards Day, which is where I have my side gig. Especially we cover the Emmy season, so we've been doing a lot of interviews, nominees and such, of which the X-Files season 10 received nothing, which is kind of not surprising. I was expecting them to go into the limited series category, but I guess they're now saying it's not a limited series, it's actually a continuation of the original. So anyway, that's what I've been doing.
Just going back to what you said about the awards, I think realistically, had season 10 been put in that category, much as we love it for our own reasons, it would have been hard to see it win anything, wouldn't it?
I was a little surprised, guest actor in a drama for Reese, he's the monster in the Darren Morgan episode. I think he gave a really strong performance. I think it's the best thing in the entire 6-episode season. But alas, I don't think anybody in the Academy watched it.
It seems that way. I mean, that deserves a lot of accolades and a lot of praise.
It does. It was a really great episode. It was the best one by far. But anyway, we've talked about that before, so
we have. Well, anyway, that's all great. You know, we'll do some promoting of our various stuff later on, but let's get to talking about what we're here for. So let's dive right in and discuss the second episode of season 2 of the X-Files, The Host. The Host is, as I say, the second episode of season 2 of the X-Files. It first aired on September the 23rd, 1994, was written by Chris Carter and directed by Daniel Sackheim. In this episode, while continuing work unrelated to the X-Files, Mulder apparently finds evidence of a giant, flukeworm-like monster living in the New Jersey sewage system.
Excuse me, Mr. Skinner. I'm very sorry to interrupt, but Agent Mulder is demanding to see you.
Is there a problem, Agent Mulder?
Yeah, there is.
I'll make an appointment.
It's kind of hard to make an appointment when you're up to your ass in raw sewage being jerked from one meaningless assignment to another.
Excuse me?
What's my next punishment? Scrubbing the bathroom floors with a toothbrush?
You're way out of line, Agent Mulder.
So I gathered.
Fine. Go to my office, Agent Mulder, please. Agent Mulder, will you please inform the room as to why you regard your homicide case in New Jersey as meaningless?
It seemed to me like a simple drugland body dump, not the type of case the FBI normally wastes its time or manpower on.
Certainly, Agent Mulder, given your recent history here, you're not one to judge what is or is not a waste of the Bureau's time or manpower.
Sir, my work on the X-Files...
The X-Files have been closed, Agent Mulder. You will carry out your new assignments and investigate them to the best of your ability. Is that not clear?
Yeah.
And I'll be anticipating your field reports on your current homicide case. Thank you.
Clarence, then, out of 10, what would you give The Host?
I would give it somewhere around a 7.5 to an 8. I mean, I think it's a great episode in terms of Monster of the Week, which I tend to gravitate toward Monsters of the Week episodes. The only thing that I think holds it back from me personally from rating it higher is that it is just a Monster of the Week episode that is sort of devoid of any kind of additional theming. Like, there are a couple of episodes where you can say that the monster speaks to other kind of broader scale themes. This one is just a straightforward monster, and it's there to gross you out, and it's there to be scary, and it does that well, but it doesn't really reach, in my opinion, for anything higher than that.
There is a little bit of underpinning sort of suggestion that, you know, man created this monster, but it is very sort of tacked on at the end, really.
Well, I don't think that they take that on quite as much in this episode, and I'm sure you'll talk about this later, but there's a lot of continuing versions of the story in comics where they talk about linking this closer to Chernobyl than they do in the end of the episode. I mean, they mention it briefly, but there's a lot more about this sort of offline of the episode that speaks to, you know, I think as Scully says in the end of the episode, we created this monster. Nature didn't make this thing, we did. That's what she says.
Yeah, it's a good line, actually. It's a really good line.
It is a great line.
It does suggest deeper analysis that this episode doesn't really get to. Yeah, I do agree with that. But then it's interesting because it's an episode that is sort of one half monster piece and one half light sort of internal FBI conspiracy. It's sure. Juggling both, really. It is very much part of a continuing, you know, ongoing story, which in the first, say, 6 episodes of this season, there is in almost all of the episodes some little wink or nod to the ongoing, you know, story that Mulder isn't on the X-Files and that there are things going on. And I think the only one that doesn't really do that is Blood, which is the next one. That's pretty much a complete standalone episode.
Yeah, but it's a horror show.
But in the in the next one after that, Sleepless, there's a lot more, you know, introducing conspiracy elements in a different way. But in this one, there is that balance, and it does work better in The Host than in a lot of other examples of this, like in season 10 actually, where they try and balance a certain couple of conspiracy beats in, or trying to juggle 2 different kinds of storylines, and it doesn't really work. In this, it does work quite well, but I think that's possibly the reason why the Fluke Man doesn't ever become more than just that creepy worm thing.
But the Fluke Man, you know, in terms of popular culture around the show, people just love this, and you think that it's a much bigger presence in the X-Files mythology than it actually is. It's only 1 episode, but the way people talk about it outside of the episode, you'd think they had revisited, kind of like Tooms. And then they never did. I mean, this is, you know, one and done kind of thing. And like I said, they do pick it up with comics later on.
Chris Carter's talked about how it was a fairly disgusting genesis that came for The Host. He was observing worms that his dog had. And then he said that he was reading about Chernobyl and the extinction of species, and he synthesized that, as he calls it, all into one little pot and came up with the episode, which obviously is unusual because it's the creator, Chris Carter, following on from the season premiere that he didn't write, which we talked a little bit about this, Darren and I, in the previous episode, but it is strange that he gave Glenn Morgan and James Wong the first episode and he did the second, and it was those guys who actually made him try and make this even scarier, apparently, than he was originally going to do, and they said push it into a proper horror, make it really weird and creepy.
I'd also read that he was in a little, he calls it a funk, but, you know, a depression, whatever you want to call it, when he wrote this episode. A lot of the Mulder dialogue basically, I think, comes straight from him and what his mental state was at the time. That I thought that was pretty interesting when I was doing some research on this.
Yeah, that is, he kind of channels himself into a little bit of Mulder, which is interesting. And it's strange because, if anything, this is one of the, I think, most creatively fertile periods of the show, or the first really creative fertile period of the X-Files, where everything just, on the whole, seems to be working pretty well. Mm-hmm. So it's odd that he was feeling that. Maybe he couldn't see the wood for the trees. You know, he didn't really see what they were creating was really good at this point. And they were going to be building on it even more. Yeah,
and I'm wondering if Fox isn't investing a little bit more money into the show with this season after a successful first season. So the episodes don't look quite as homegrown, let's say.
Apparently, the director, Daniel Sackheim, as well, was asked by Carter to come back and helm the episode. He said, he told me the premise was about half man, half worm, and I told my agent, and my agent said, if that's what they're doing, the show's not long for television, so maybe you should think of doing something else. So, not all the agents get it right.
Yeah, I do think they should call this episode, it should have a subtitle, and the subtitle should be Poor Darren Morgan.
Yeah.
We can talk about why I would think that in a minute, but that's that poor guy. I'm glad they gave him a writing job on the show because, and I'm glad he seems to have a sense of humor because I can't imagine going through what he did.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah. He plays the Flute Man, obviously, and he got his own back though because apparently when he was appearing with David Duchovny in the sewer scenes, he relieved himself in the water, and he said, yes. I figured Duchovny would never find out. But
well, it took like 6 hours to put the suit on, so they couldn't, and there was no poop shoot or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my God. Doesn't sound fun, does it?
No, it just adds a whole nother level to the whole thing.
It certainly has an effect, which we'll talk about later. But I'd give this episode a solid 8 out of 10. I think it's got a lot of good things going for it, and I'm joined in that kind of score by the masses on IMDb. Because they gave this a collective out of 2,708 votes, a collective 8.4 out of 10, which is pretty good actually. Makes it more one of the higher tier, in the higher tier episodes of the X-Files. Let's break down then the host in a bit more detail. So the episode begins with the Russian freighter. Which is travelling in the Atlantic Ocean, and it's a pretty grimy ship, really. Although I'm pretty sure that they reused the set of the ship later for the sewage scenes, or there was some crossover.
Yeah, I think so. I do want to ask, what is a Russian freighter doing 2 miles off the coast of New Jersey?
It's, yeah. Maybe they hadn't been told the Cold War was over.
I don't know. But you've got this freighter where everybody speaks, fluent Russian, and it's 2 miles off the coast of New Jersey. When I watched it again this morning, I just assumed for some reason that it was 2 miles off the coast of, like, Russia. But no. And that the fluke and then I was thinking about, well, how did the fluke travel all that way across the Atlantic Ocean to end up in New Jersey? But then I realized the subtitle said, nope, it's off the coast of New Jersey.
Off the coast of New Jersey. It is a good question, really. It does they don't really ever answer that. In fact, the whole Russian ship thing is very much put to the side, really, for the majority of the episode, and they don't really go back to it a lot. But yeah, that is a big question. Maybe it is the fact that the Cold War's over and they're like, just come into our waters, it's fine. We're all friends now. It's okay. Come and do whatever you're doing with sewage here.
Radioactive sewage, nonetheless.
Yes. Yeah, they wouldn't have let him in if they'd have known. But we obviously meet Dmitri, who is a poor, lowly young worker on this ship who really does draw the short straw, doesn't he, basically, in this episode.
Yeah, when he opens the the toilets have started to back up, which makes the ship, which I'm sure smelled wonderful to begin with, smell even better. And then they force him to go and unclog the pipes, basically. And he gets when they open that is basically, I don't know what it is, this massive tank of sewage, and you just open that thing. I mean, you could practically smell it watching it, and it's just horrifying. It's just horrifying.
It does make you go, oh my God, what is in there? Because you don't obviously see anything. Then you just see Dmitri get sucked into the water tank, and he's gone. And it's a fairly short and sweet, but effective opening, which suggests that something quite horrible is on approach to New Jersey. Dmitri was played by an actor called Raoul Ganiv, who would later go on and appear as a guard in just called Guard in Patient X in season 5. Which I believe he has a lot of scenes with Krychek when he's in the Gulag, the Tunguska Gulag, later on.
Excellent Russian accent.
Thank you. I have been practicing. Maybe I should do that. When we get to Tunguska, the episode, I may just do the whole episode in that accent, possibly, and lose a lot of listeners in the process.
Yeah, there you go. Because if you can't offend someone, then what's the point of living?
Well, precisely. I'm glad we're on the same page. So yeah, we're out of the credits then, and we're back with Mulder, and he's still on wiretap duty after Little Green Men, where he went back with his tape of aliens, and there were no aliens on it, and he was very, I've still got you, Scully, I've still got myself, and that. Yeah, he's pretty fed up, isn't he? Flicking his sunflower seeds, and he looks just like he's had enough at this point.
Yeah, there's really not that much going on in that scene, except the fact that, again, it's Mulder and his seeds, and he's playing football with them or flicking them into the bag as if to kick a field goal or something.
Yeah, basically, you got to that point.
And I don't even think there's anything interesting going on the tape.
No, it's just it sounds like a lot of small time hoodlums just having hushed conversations about nothing, and he's having to basically pretend he's interested when he's in fact bored to death. But luckily, he gets saved by a random FBI guy who comes in and tells him that he's been requested for a case because apparently that wiretap isn't important. What gets me is, even though, right, he's pulled off this by Skinner, as we find out, he was chewed out by Skinner in the last episode for leaving his wiretap and something like, sabotaging months of surveillance. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we've got a dead body. Come on, off you go. Did they just forget about about the surveillance?
Well, they replaced him with somebody else. But what got me in this one was they're like, okay, you're going to be on a plane in 45 minutes. Well, clearly this is pre-911, 9/11.
Yeah.
You can do nothing in an airport in 45 minutes. I don't care who you are.
You're right.
But,
they do replace him, actually. I'd missed that.
Yeah.
I think I was so intent on the fact that Mulder's getting out of there. I think I missed that they replace him. That's true, because there's two agents. That's right. You're absolutely right there. So it does seem like they've gone to a lot of trouble to keep Mulder on this surveillance, and then they're really playing with him a little bit, I think. And that's one of the things in this episode. He seems to get shift from pillar to post a little bit.
Well, I think they punish him a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah.
Just a little. That's the FBI's form of hand slapping when he does something he shouldn't, is to put him on some kind of shit duty.
Yeah, and this is the thing. They think at the beginning that this is going to be that kind of case. He goes down to the crime scene. He meets up with Detective Norman. There's not much there, and he then goes back to the FBI, and he wants to speak to Skinner because he thinks that this is rubbish. You're humiliating me now. But there is a nice, after he gets past the quite officious secretary, and I think this might be the first time we've seen Skinner have an officious, slightly sort of, you can't go in there, secretary, because he has a few of them over the course of the show.
Now, is she Mitch Pileggi's wife?
I don't think so. I think that
this is not the right one. Okay.
No.
I
think this is a different actress who, yes, she was. Yeah, she was succeeded in the role by Arlene Pileggi. Yeah, as you say, later on. But I don't know if we see this woman again. She doesn't look familiar after this. I think she couldn't have dealt with this in the right way. So Skinner gave her a walking papers after this, possibly, because Mulder still gets in there and he's saying, you're putting me on these cases, and it's, what's the point of all this? Only to find there's a little bit of a surprise in the office, isn't there?
Yes, he's meeting in front of a board of some sort, which was fantastic.
That was good. It was a nice little moment where there's a little look on Duchovny's face as if to say, "Oh God," as he walks in. It's just that. Oh, stitch me up, Walter. Cheers.
And then he heads off to Jersey.
Yeah. After Skinner has put on, I think, a bit of a show, I hear. I mean, whoever these FBI guys are is incidental, but it's the idea that he's making the point that Skinner is in charge and he's making Mulder's life tough. He says the X-Files are closed. This is your job. Get on with it. And it's the beginning of that undercurrent of FBI stuff throughout the entire episode, isn't it? Because Chris Carter is still trying to make you wonder whose side Skinner is on, really, isn't he? There's a little bit of a uncertainty.
Yes, completely. And they don't even. I mean, this is carried on for a while. I mean, I know sometimes Skinner comes out and says, I want this should have been an X-File. You're absolutely right. I think he says that toward the end of this episode. But they do a really great job in these first few seasons of making you wonder where his true allegiances lie. Now, of course, by the end of the series, it's very clear where his allegiances lie. Yeah. But early on, he's much more of an enigma.
He is, and it's only really by the time we get to One Breath this season where we start to see that Skinner does have a lot more respect for what Mulder's doing, really. And it's towards the end of this mini arc, I guess, really, that opens the season up. But yeah, right now there is still that level of frustration in Mulder that he doesn't know where he stands. 1 minute he's been put on this wiretapping, then he's been taken off, and he's frustrated. So when he's sitting by the, I think it's one of the, is it the Washington Memorial, the big obelisk?
It is the Washington, yeah.
It is, isn't it?
You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's sitting across the water from that on his own, and then Scully turns up, and in the kind of clandestine sort of chats they were having at the beginning of this season, really. You know, sitting on park benches and things like that because they weren't officially supposed to be working together. And he's saying he's thinking of quitting, basically. He seems to be, like Chris Carter was, he seems to be at his lowest ebb by this point. And he's wondering, what's the point in being there if I can't pursue the work I want to do? Which is interesting. It's an interesting thing to do with Mulder after Little Green Men, I think.
And it also marks the first time we see a pattern of Scully in a pregnancy, Gillian Anderson, where she wears nothing but trench coats and is filmed from the shoulders up because she's like 16 months pregnant at this point.
Pretty pregnant, yeah. It's true. There's a lot of moments in these opening few episodes that are there's a lot of coats. It's true.
Lots of autopsies and big lab coats.
Yeah. This scene's nice. Again, it sort of follows on from the scenes in Little Green Men, where Scully is the one who's basically saying to him, you know, you can't give up. You've got to carry on. You've got to look into these cases. You know, there is a dead body. There is something to chew on, so to speak. If that's not a terrible Fluke Man pun without realising.
That's brilliant, though.
Well, yeah.
No, but it is interesting because she's the one, you know, she's the skeptic, right? And she's the one that's pushing him forward. You know, yes, I don't necessarily believe anything you say, but I do get a lot out of our partnership, and I think that you're an asset to the FBI. So you shouldn't give up. Yeah. Even though, you know, in the next breath she'll tell him that she's crazy for believing in aliens and all this. That he's crazy, excuse me.
Yeah, but she never tells him to give up. She always says, let's figure it out. You know, she even says to him at one point, you know, come and work at Quantico with me. Come and work with me, Mulder. It'll be fun.
But the FBI wants to keep them apart.
Well, exactly, yeah. They still do. But Scully obviously has got a head for an autopsy, and we get a possibly the most grisly one we've had yet, actually, on the show. The makeup of Dimitri's body is really visceral, and it really does turn your stomach a little bit, doesn't it?
It does, particularly when she does the liver autopsy.
Yeah,
and that little thing comes popping out.
Oh yeah, the little fluke, which is one of those very sort of reminiscent of Ridley Scott's Alien kind of moments, isn't it? Of this parasitic thing inside a body just appearing out and going like that, and Scully's, oh my god, with some great ominous kind of thumping sort of drum almost beat behind the episode. There's a lot of really good music from Mark Snow in this, a lot of sort of echoing, creepy kind of twinkling and then drum beat kind of music going on that really adds a certain dark, ominous feeling to the whole thing, and you get quite a bit of that in the autopsy scene, actually. But it's grim. Don't have your dinner grim before eating it.
No, you should never eat anywhere. The X-Files has totally ruined me for eating, watching television, which is okay. It's probably something I need to do less of.
And it's a similar story when we go back into the sewer then, and we've got the sequence of the sewer guy who gets attacked down there. And I thought that the direction by Daniel Sackheim in this is really quite good in places. I think that the sewers, the way they're shot, the way they're filmed, the lighting used, it really does it's quite evocative, I think. I think they did a good job in making those sewers quite an oppressive, eerie, kind of grimy place.
Yeah, the lighting is really particularly great because you get a lot of external lighting coming in through the sewer grates, and you know the worker down there, he's there to repair a grid or something that had been chewed apart by who knows what, and the light coming through there casts a lot of really interesting shadows in that scene. In fact, they keep going back to it, I think, or there was at one point where they'd use which is a little cheesy, totally 90s camera trick, but they go slow-mo on it, and you could see the water like very slowly pouring into the scene, and I think that's at the end of that particular sequence you're talking about. When they pull him out of the water, they go back to that grate, and it's in slow-mo.
Yeah, that always does stand out to me, actually. It's a bit of a surprise when he survives as well, because you don't really think that's going to happen. You think this is going to be one of those traditional, another guy's going to die, you're going to maybe see a little bit more of the monster or whatever it is, and he's gone. But no, he actually pops back up, which triggers the next part of the episode. But I thought that was quite good, because I did not expect that the first time I watched it.
No, and it's good that he had his friend over there with a rope to throw into the sewer. Because, Why you have a rope down there in the sewer, I don't know, but there you go. It's there to rescue people who are being pulled under by fluke monsters.
He's obviously thought of this ahead of time. He's gone, what could be down there? I better have a rope just in case there is some sort of evil sewage monster. You never know.
There should be a glass panel with, in case of fluke, break glass, and there's a rope inside.
If that wasn't in the comics that followed up, I'll be very, very disappointed. Apparently, Chris Carter did quite a bit of research in depicting the Newark sewer system. And he said, my father was actually a construction worker who put in sewer lines and storm drains for a living. So he was a resource for me. He said, telling me how these things were built and how the catwalks looked. So they did quite a bit of work on creating that set on stage. That whole sewer set was on stage with water tanks and running water, and I think it shows. I think that the quality of that is borne out by the fact they spent a bit of money, and like you said earlier, they had a bit more money to actually create a set on stage. Yeah,
and I think the set is actually the unsung hero of the episode. I mean, if you think about it, you just assume that they're filming all this on location of some sort, but no, I mean it is actually a constructed set. And it's just really well done, particularly when you get to the next sewer sequence. When we'll get to it in a minute, but with the tubing, that's also very interestingly filmed and created.
There's some good production design on this, without question. But then after this first attack, we've got the man being examined by quite an arch doctor who.
I love that she says she thinks he was trying to get out of work on a workman's comp complaint.
yeah.
And he's got this like massive bite on the back of his back, but she's like, oh no, he's just trying to get out of work.
He's obviously on the make, isn't he? Of course he is. Forget this massive gaping wound. Yeah. She's played by Gabrielle Rose, who appeared in season 1 in the episode Deep Throat, where she played Mrs. Budahas, who was the wife of one of the test pilots who came back really burned and crazy. So she's a returning face, like you get so many in the X-Files. It's almost every episode you'll get somebody who will appear again or has appeared before. It's part of the great thing about Vancouver, in that there's not many actors up there. So they all appear on everything. I've been watching Smallville lately, and there is not an episode that goes by where at least one X-Files character actor appears. It is brilliant. Every single time I'm like, oh, it's him from Pusher. Oh, it's him from from The Host. Oh, it's her from...
It's an incestuous community.
It really is. It's interesting as well, I thought, how the sewer worker guy thinks that it was a python that did this, which almost seems like a sort of thing Scully would say, actually. That, maybe it's a python Mulder in the sewer system, at which point Mulder would go, what? What are you talking about?
Someone flushed their pet snake down the toilet. Their pet python did not clog their pipes and made it all the way into the sewer system.
It got all the way down and made a massive gaping wound on a man's back. So yeah, that made me chuckle a little bit. This scene obviously would have been fairly innocuous had it not been for the phone call that Mulder gets. Not just from Scully, when he basically says, can't talk now, go away, effectively. And then the phone rings again. And he's like, Scully, it's really not a good time. I'm in the middle of talking to a really sort of arch doctor and a guy who thinks he's been bitten by a snake. And then it's not her. It's a brand new character.
Who we come to know as X.
X, Mr. X, the voice of Stephen Williams, who appears...
You have a friend at the FBI.
You have a friend at the FBI. Yeah. And then phone down. He's like Mulder in that he doesn't say hello or bye. It's that's same lack of manners that Mulder has, bless him. And it's kind of... suggesting that, again, it's a bit of a head fuck for Mulder, for want of a better term, in that he doesn't quite know what's going on at the FBI. At the one point, they're making his life difficult, and then somebody, apparently, is looking out for him. So he's massively confused. And I quite like the way that was written in almost arbitrarily in the middle of a scene, in the middle of something else going on. There's a sudden quick call. By the way, who's this guy? What's he just told him? Gone. I thought that was really good, actually.
Yeah, it is. And watching it again, it's maybe a little less effective knowing who X is and what he does ultimately. But no, it is quite nicely mysterious in this one. It brings you back into a little bit of the overall conspiracy, even on a Monsters of the Week episode.
Yeah, it really does. It's interesting as well in that they would have probably shot that scene later than this episode, because as we'll talk about in Sleepless in a couple of weeks, Stephen Williams wasn't the first person cast as X, and X was apparently originally a very, very different character, and we will go into this later. But they would have had to. Stephen Williams wasn't cast at first, so they would have had to film this scene, or at least record Stephen Williams' voice later, and then loop it over that person in the chair. So that it's interesting how it would have been interesting to know how they would have written it. I'm presuming it would have been written in the same way for the original Miss X as it was going to be. But people don't always realise that it wasn't originally the guy we know as X. But yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a couple of weeks. But then we've got Scully doing a little bit of an explanation of the fluke parasite.
Before we leave the examination scene, I do have to comment that the poor guy has this horrible metallic taste in his mouth, and the doctor thinks nothing of that, and she gives him some gum.
That's true.
Quite possibly the worst doctor in New Jersey. He's like, oh my God, I've got this horrible metallic taste in my mouth. I can't get rid of it. She's like, here, it'll go away. Take some gum.
Have some gum.
I mean, just the worst.
Have some gum
Doctor.
while you try and claim your disability benefits. You
slacker.
Yeah, she's terrible.
She basically pumps him full of drugs and throws him out the door. I don't know what to make of this giant diamond scar on its back, but here, have some gum.
It's probably a python. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You'll be fine. Eat this gum. You'll be fine in the morning.
They don't even admit him into the hospital. I mean, come on. Come on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That would raise enough of an alarm bell, wouldn't it? But yeah, Scully's in the next scene with Mulder, and she's explaining the fluke. And it's even more creepy to know that the fluke actually does exist as a parasite in nature, and that they've basically taken a real life parasite and found a way to make him a giant fluke man, which I always thought was quite good, in that they've managed to weave it into a certain, real life parasitic science, and how the Scolex of the parasite is the one that maybe chewed up the man's back. Scolex would have potentially been another good name for the episode.
That sort of calls to what they do with Scully these days when she's pregnant and can't run around, and she becomes the doctor. She becomes the voice of authority, the scientist, that just basically spouts out facts. And this is certainly a prime example of that.
Yeah, it really is, yeah. But there's some lovely little character moments in this. The first one is how when Mulder is, has got the fluke in the jar, and he's saying, well, that bite mark is huge. And she's saying, how big do you think the Scolex is? And she just stops and laughs. And then there's a little moment, and she says, it felt like old times. I loved that. That was so nice, because it's a little bit almost like it's almost like an in-joke in a way, but it's the characters referencing the fact that they've been here before with all these mad theories, and they're not on the X-Files anymore, and they're not partners, and they miss it, and that was lovely.
Yeah, it was a nice little moment between them. There are few and far between those moments.
Yeah, they can be. Yeah, in the lesser written episodes. And then it's also interesting at the end how Mulder believes that Scully's the one who had that call made to him, the X made, and that she thinks
she's highly offended.
Yeah,
she's like, "Forgive me, but I would never betray a confidence." Dun, dun, dun.
And then he's like, "Oh, so if you didn't do it, then what's that about?" But it did lead me to wonder: does she really have that influence to do that anymore? She spent a year working with Mulder, and she burned a few bridges over the first season with people who she'd worked with before, or who had thought she was going to discredit the X-Files, and then she didn't, and so I do wonder now, would she really still be able to sort of have enough pals at the FBI to make old Mulder feel better with a little weird phone call, which is a weird thing to do anyway, to get a random person ring up and go, "I'm your friend, I'm at the FBI." It's weird.
It is weird. It is weird, and Mulder's paranoia and conspiracy tendencies aren't often always right or even well thought out.
Certainly not in this case.
Yeah,
definitely. So yeah, he's now obviously wondering, well, who was that guy? What's this about? What's going on? As are we, naturally. But now we're with that poor sewer worker guy, the jobs, the slacker.
Yes, who's The gum didn't work, and now he's brushing his teeth, and he tries 2 or 3 times, and then he just gives up and puts the whole tube in his mouth, and swishes around with it, and he starts bleeding. And of course, whenever you start bleeding from the mouth, the first thing you do is you get in the shower instead of calling an ambulance.
I did wonder. It did make me wonder. I was like, how do you get that? Yeah, really? Is that what you need to do? It is a bit strange.
Some of these things are just, it's yeah.
You have
questions like
it's what makes it fun. You have to do it. You have to ask. But it's quite a gruesome scene, really, isn't it? All the sludge that he starts to vomit out, and then up comes the fluke, and it's one of those scenes where you go, oh no.
I was watching it and I kept thinking about the actor having to spit that thing out of his mouth. Ugh. Yeah. Just awful.
That would not have been fun. I don't think I'd have enjoyed putting all that toothpaste in my mouth either. Because that would be quite like sort of bracing, wouldn't it? Having all that mint in your mouth. Like that. He suffered. Do you reckon they told him all this before he got the part?
I don't know.
I bet
maybe he did it for the near softcore porn scene where he's taking a shower and he rubs the water over his head very slowly and sort of.
Maybe they said to him, "Look, that's the point where you make love to the beautiful doctor that you'll have been talking to before." And then he gets there and she's a middle-aged woman. And oh, by the way, you're actually going to vomit up a worm. This isn't what I signed up for.
Well, what I wonder, though, is, and maybe this is my lack of basic knowledge about science, but why would he die from vomiting that thing? Because, he dies, but they don't show him die. So I'm just curious as to what exactly would have been the cause of death. He threw it up. He threw up some blood, but it was attached to the liver if it's the same type deal as the autopsy in the earlier scene. What would actually kill him? I mean, because his body expelled the parasite, and people get tapeworms all the time and they don't die.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a good question, because that's not explained, is it? They do say he's dead.
Yes,
but it's very throwaway. By the way, he's dead.
He doesn't fall in the shower. You just see his feet as the little fluke goes down the drain. And then, a couple of scenes later, they say, that guy died.
Yeah, by the way, that's a good question. Maybe it was something to do with the fact that once a fluke like this, maybe it was radiation. Maybe it's sort of radiation poisoning of some kind. But it wouldn't have been much to put that in, would it? And to say, oh yeah, he died because the fluke had flooded his system with radiation.
Maybe on its way out, it's ripped the lining of his stomach and he bled out. Something.
Yeah, something like that. Good observation, Clarence, because that is an open question. Yeah, that's what the X-Cast is for, to make people seek the truth about the plot holes in the X-Files. So anyway, we're after this, we're back with Mulder, and he's heading down to the sewers to have a bit more of a look, and he speaks to Ray, who is one of the guys at the sewer processing plant, and he's boasting about how this plant is 100 years old and all this, and he seems to be very proud of that, and shows him the antiquated system and everything like that. And it is a good point to actually make that the fact is that if it wasn't for the fact we knew about the Russian ship, we could have extrapolated the fact that the Fluke Man's been down here for years. It could have been like a Tombs situation where you've had something gestating for 100 years inside, but it's that's not the case. Obviously, he's been flushed in, and this is probably the most iconic moment in this episode coming up, isn't it? Where Mulder, Ray, and Charlie, who's the sewer guy, who gets very excited and goes, "Look, it's in there."
I'm sure it's not every day you get to see something swimming in the sewers.
True. A horribly dysmorphed Darren Morgan in his painful makeup, swimming around in a tank with his big Skolex suckers. And it is a great moment. It's one of those from I think I've mentioned this in other podcasts, but on the UK VHS releases of the show, there was always like trailers and documentaries and things about the X-Files, and it collated lots of clips, and this is the one that I remember where he goes, "It's in there," and that's when we see the Fluke Man, and that's the image of this episode that always sticks in my mind. Like it's a lot of people really, because it is iconic, isn't it? It's an iconic monster from the show.
Yeah, and it's the first time you get to see him face, sort of head to toe. And what's really interesting is, to me, from this scene, is when they capture him in the tube, and the camera light, or their flashlight focuses on him, and then they cut back to their faces, and they're all just kind of like, huh. Not like horrified that they're seeing like a 6-foot worm. They're just kind of like,
That's true.
That is a worm in the pipe, and it has a big gaping mouth.
Yeah.
It's just no screaming, no reactions, just kind of like, huh.
Yeah.
I remember the last time I saw a worm. Wasn't half as big as this, though. Or something like that. They're just so nonplussed by the whole thing. It's kind of funny.
I mean, in real life, they couldn't have done this on network television, but in real life, you'd go, "What the fuck is that in the water tank?" Wouldn't you? You really would. You just exclaim and go, "Oh my god!" or run away screaming, like you say. It is, it is quite a... It's more Mulder's kind of Sherlock Holmesian curiosity that goes, what's this? Instead of going, what is that? But,
or David Duchovny's patented emoting.
It's very much in play. It's surprising. It's, in fact, actually, the Fluke Man is different in the sense that he's one of the monsters that you do see. Because the X-Files, it wasn't always the most subtle show, and it did often show its monsters in the end. But quite often it would also go out of its way to try and make things a little bit more oblique and to shield things, or you see things very quickly, or you see a flash of something. Whereas with the Fluke Man, he's there fully to see, isn't he? They want to show off Darren Morgan's 6-hour makeup.
It's about 20 minutes into the episode, though, so he attacks a couple of people before you get to see it. And you've just come out of the scene where the guy's thrown up the worm, which is, that's horrifying, and then you get to see this. So I think it's well staged, and they do show it early in terms of it's not in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the episode, but it is late enough in the episode to where you actually have some build up of, okay, what the hell is this thing? So it's well timed.
It is. And for those of you who don't know who Darren Morgan is, he goes on to write this season Humbug, which is one of the greatest comedies of the X-Files ever did, and he goes on to write about 3 or 4 more, including one in the latest series. I think overall he writes five comic X-Files overall. And they are 5 of the best episodes you'll ever see of the show. So he started in heavy makeup and he ended with a lot of plaudits because he is a genius.
Well, he wrote one of my favorites. Aside from Home, I think I did say it was my favorite last time, was Jose Chung's From Outer Space. A
recognised classic. It would be in most people's top 10s, as would be Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, which is a glorious hour of television. So he is a bit of a genius. So you will look forward to getting to those very soon. But now we are back with Scully after this. After we see the Fluke Man and see Mulder's underplayed reaction, and she's doing research. She's contextualising a few things, and I like the fact that she gets the National Enquirer put through the door. And that's how she makes the connection to the Russian ship. I think that's very X-Files in the fact that, they don't get information from, traditional sources. It is very much like a tacky, stupid tabloid.
It is. But I felt like if these episodes had aired today, I felt like they would have had a character in there who was a tabloid journalist. That was perhaps a recurring character that was writing stuff like this. Like, I feel like... Yeah. Tabloid culture wasn't as big then as it is now, and I felt like they would have, you definitely would have had someone coming up and saying, I wrote this, rather than it just being slipped under the door. Kind of like, are you familiar with Hannibal? Yes. A kind of like a sort of more National Enquirer version of Freddie Lowndes from that show. Yeah, that kind of person who's who's writing stuff that affects the cases, and they get information from, and who may not always be somebody who is on their side. Potentially, that would have been interesting. Actually, when they eventually make season 11 or they reboot the show one day, you may see something like that. It's possible. But this is a tip off from whoever the friend is in the FBI, because we don't know who put it through the door. It could have been X. It could have been Skinner. It could have been Skinner's assistant. We don't know. Whoever it was somebody who was apparently a track star in high school, because she gets that thing under the door, she hops right up, and I mean it's a matter of 3 seconds, and then she opens the door and they're gone. I mean, they must have really booked it out of there. I'd love it if there's actually an open window, sort of, we can't quite see, it's just there, and they just dived out of the window. Just that would have been amazing.
But yeah,
But
this had been...
there's no lights wherever she is, so they're probably hiding in plain sight behind a cabinet, and she just can't see because it's a dark, abandoned basement.
yeah, where her office apparently is. But it's again suggesting that there is a friend, there is somebody helping them, which is the undercurrent of this whole story. Right. And that's where Mulder brings her in to have a look at the Flute Man. And this is a interesting moment for Scully, because it's not very often she gets to see this stuff either. She doesn't, very, very rarely does she see something that is quantifiably weird. And, he does. She does. Yeah. And hermaphroditic, as she says.
And again, they get to film her at a really interesting angle so they can hide the pregnancy. She's filmed through the door window.
Yeah, you only even see her head popping in. Yeah. But I think she does do some good little connectives here. She figures out that Dimitri's tattoo is the name Dimitri and connects it to the National Enquirer ship, and manages to then tether up in a way that Mulder couldn't because he didn't have all the context and all the information. So it's a nice little link that whoever did it gave Scully to be able to connect a few dots, which I thought was good. And we do in this scene, we do get a little bit more of characterization when Scully says, in reference to Mulder's idea of quitting and going his own way, and her saying it would mean more to me than just professionalism if you left. In a very Scully-ish way of saying, "You're my friend, don't go, please."
Go on without you.
But Mulder, obviously being completely socially inept, would not probably pick up on it, because he has all the social and emotional range of a cucumber quite often, really. Unless he's under extreme pressure, and then he starts to show some. But otherwise, he's oblivious to everything.
It's unless if Scully's in danger.
Well, yeah.
Then he gets angry.
He gets angry. He can never tell when she's being nice to him, or he never really responds. In many ways, he's just going, yeah, and walking, carries on.
I think it's all the porn he watches. I think it makes him detached from everything emotionally.
Porn has just ruined his brain.
Exactly.
It's not the weird LSD kind of drugs that Unusual Suspects in season 5 suggests warped his mind and made him more paranoid. It's actually porn.
Yeah, that's one of the weirdest things about the X-Files to me is as many times as she sort of walks in and makes a crack about how much porn he watches, that is just so odd to me. It just doesn't. I mean, I'm not a prude or anything. It doesn't. I don't care, but it's just like she's just so, as a coworker, she's just so blasé about the fact that he watches a lot of pornography and she makes jokes about it. Yeah. It's just so weird to me. It's one of the things I love about the X-Files.
Yeah, it is odd, and even sometimes at work. He's watching it, and she's very much like, "Oh, you and your porn, Mulder." Oh.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, that's not what would happen. You would immediately get to HR and go, "I like this guy, but I think he's watching porn at work. I don't know if that's a good idea." Can you have a word with him, please?
It's not on the upward career trajectory.
It is, it is, and it is weird. From Scully has always seemed a bit of a feminist in many respects. She's very much a woman fighting in a man's world. So for her to be quite blasé about porn, it is odd. So yeah, anyway, at this point, Mulder goes back to Skinner with his case report, and Skinner is very much trying to put him in his place by making him wait while he reads. Mulder's twiddling his thumbs in his office while Skinner's very slowly flicking through the pages, going, "Yeah, you'll sit there till I'm ready, Mulder." Then, after he's done, Skinner basically makes the point that this case hasn't been about the X-Files as much as it's been about testing Mulder's effectiveness. Well, and again, it's punishing him. It is that whole sense of, we're going to make you feel like you're under suspicion or you're being watched, and we're going to test you. And even though it is suggested that the friend in the FBI might still be Skinner to some extent, it's very much still he might not be their friend. It's very, and this scene just underscores that again when at the end Skinner says when Mulder basically says, this is an X-File effectively now, it's been proven that, and Skinner says, well, it wasn't my decision to shut them down. He says that in all but name, doesn't he? He basically says, right. Well, some decisions are beyond me. So
Skinner isn't the total power here.
No. And it's also, again, reflective of the fact that he's not necessarily the bad guy because he wasn't his choice. And it's not saying he wouldn't have shut the X-Files down, but it's not saying he would. So Chris Carter's playing Skinner's cards very close to his chest here. But it's a good scene. It is that good little back and forth. And Mitch Pileggi just continues to show why he's really good in this role. Because this is only his like third appearance as Skinner, and already he's Skinner, isn't he?
He absolutely is.
So yeah, Mulder goes off knowing that he's onto something. He's got to finish this case, and the Fluke Man is being hilariously transported. Because that's the other thing that they say in that scene. Skinner's like, yeah, we're going to take him to a sanatorium, and he's like, what are you talking about? He's a monster. You can't just put him in a mental asylum.
Who's the guy that gets to go into the case and to the cell and say, okay, get on the gurney, we're going to strap you in? And there's like, okay, this is a monster with this is very visibly a monster. It is not man. Yeah. And they just put like two thin little straps on him. I mean, it's such a horror cliche. Actually, it's kind of like whenever, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Halloween movies, but whenever in the sequels, whenever they would transfer Michael Myers from one facility to another, it would just be like some duct tape and a little piece of rope, and they're all like shocked that he's escaped.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And what I thought was funny is when they're wheeling the Fluke Man out on a gurney.
Yeah,
why didn't they cover him up?
I know, he's just sitting there going...
He's like, surely this guy would freak people out. Surely you should just put a blanket over his face or something as you're wheeling him towards It was just hilarious. It was so funny.
Well, I'm just curious as to why they even try to transport him anywhere. I mean, this is a monster. Why not just throw it in a cell or just put a bullet in it and be done with it? Just why take him to a sanatorium? What they go to sanatorium? It's very clearly not a man.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It is strange. And they're just asking for trouble, transporting him as well. And then I did laugh though that after the marshal who's transporting him gets killed off screen, there's a shot that says live bait.
Yes,
that really made me chuckle. But then obviously the Fluke Man gets away and he goes into a portaloo and hides his way in a toilet system. And that's another good little, very X-Files-y kind of fear that some monster could be in your toilet bowl and could reach up and pull you in or come up inside you. It's horrible. It's a horrible thought, really. I did think it was both slightly creepy and slightly comical when the Fluke Man is going up the pipe.
It's fantastic because the engine can't pull him up, and so it's like whining and really struggling to put him in there, and all of a sudden he makes it through and it goes, and then it just comes normally.
It's really funny. But yeah, so he's back off into the sewer system, and he's off to cause some havoc again. And this is where the crime scene is, because they found the marshal and everything like that. And Detective Norman's got nothing, or as he calls it, butt kiss. I've got butt kiss, Mulder. And then Mulder's like, knows he needs to go and hunt this thing, and then he gets another call. He gets another mysterious call. X really does know how to time his calls, doesn't he? He really does wait, it seems, that Mulder's really busy, and then he's like, right, I'm going to call him now.
It's a gift. It's a sixth sense that X has.
But he tells him a very severe phrase: reinstatement of the X-Files must be undeniable.
No, not to put any more pressure on the fact that you've got a 6-foot worm monster going around killing people. Now the entire the validity of the X-Files is now all on Mulder's ability to solve this case. Thanks, X. I was just thinking as we were talking about this, how wonderful this would have been. It's a very strong episode, but it's directed as if it was a horror episode. What if this had been directed more like Scully and Mulder Meet the Were-Monster?
Yeah,
like from a comic aspect. I mean, it would just. I would argue almost that it people would love it even more if it had a more defined comic slant to it. Maybe that's just my opinion, but
yeah. I was going to say I don't think it would take that much retrofitting to make the Fluke Man a comedy monster. Really, it really wouldn't. You just have to have like scenes of him maybe just walking along, like waddling along or something like that, and then jumping into a lake. So those people you could do lots of little things
because they don't show him moving around like that. They don't show how he got from the.
No.
From the ambulance into the porta potty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he would have conceivably just wiggled his way like the little the conjoined twin in Humbug that just seems to wiggle his way out and then bites people. It's quite funny. It wouldn't take much, definitely, and I think you're absolutely right. Really, and the fact that they managed to make this scary, even when you see the Fluke Man in all his wormy glory. And there is a little bit of comedy in there.
It is.
Because it's a man in a suit.
Yeah, and a lot of these episodes dance that line between it's a black comedy, effectively.
Yeah, but they managed to pull it off really well. So you've got the climax basically now where Mulder goes into the sewer system because they deduce that the Fluke Man's trying to get out to sea, which does show that it has a certain element of intelligence. It's not just reacting to elements. It has a mind, and it has some sort of instinctual will about it, which is interesting, really, because they don't get much into what that is, really.
No, but he has an intimate knowledge of the New Jersey sewer system.
That's the scene we didn't see, where he went and studied the plans in the office.
Yep.
He crept into Ray's office and studied the plans.
Drank some coffee.
Yeah. But Scully makes the point that it's trying to reproduce and create hosts, and, you know, because and she says it's hermaphroditic, it's basically trying to self-replicate, which is another creepy, interesting idea that there could be more of these things ultimately, you know, rising up, which is obviously one of the things that happened to the sewer man, and that's why in the end we get another Fluke Man, you know, potentially, and it's an interesting idea.
Well, there's a lot of undercurrent about, you know, and I think they do this a lot in some of these Monster of the Week episodes, where they're talking about, is it a monster? Is it truly inherently evil, or is it bad because it's doing the thing that it's genetically engineered to do? I mean, maybe genetically engineered isn't the right term for this, but by nature, you know, are they evil by thought or by nature? And then in this case, he's you know, doing what he is designed to do. He is doing the thing that prolongs his own life. He is doing what any animal would do, and it just so happens that sort of goes in direct conflict with humanity. So he's positioned as a monster, but he's not really a monster per se. He's just a thing that has been created somehow that is trying to prolong its life, and that is sort of the ultimate human attribute. Yeah,
it's a really good way of looking at it, because there are monsters with much more evil intelligence in the X-Files, and the Fluke Man isn't, definitely. It is ultimately some form of replicating parasite, and it just looks like a monster. So it's right. You know, and it obviously kills in order to do that. So it is interesting, really. And we of course see Mulder go into the water, and you're thinking, oh my God, that's not a good idea, Mulder. Not with what's been going on. And the sewer director Ray gets sucked underneath when he's very casually going, oh, I'm fine. It's gone.
It's good. So he doesn't get bitten. No. Surprised at that, because he gets pulled under quite a bit, but you know, he doesn't get bitten.
I'd be insulted though. I'd be like, if I was him, I'd be like, why wouldn't it bite me? What's wrong with me? Why doesn't it want to replicate in me?
What's wrong with my upper back? But then, like, Mulder chops him in half somehow with the sewer grate. Is that what they do? That's what they do, right? It's not entirely. I mean, I guess they do put like the there's a storm drain cover or whatever, and they cut him in half with that.
Yeah, that's basically what. And then you get the piercing scream of the Fluke Man, because he's in quite a bit of pain. But yeah, it's a decent sort of horror movie way to kill a monster, isn't it? You know, it's quite old fashioned and classic, really. You trap it underneath a blade. It dies. Simple. Yeah, he wraps it up fairly neatly. And I thought the climax was pretty good. There's some really good, again, creepy music from Mark Snow throughout the climactic bit. It's well directed, it's well shot, and it wraps things up quite nicely, really, in the end, to the point where you have a nice little final scene between Mulder and Scully in which they contextualise everything, really. And
yep. And then they toss in that little bit about Chernobyl, which, you know, in the last 2 minutes of the episode, you think, wow, that could have been really cool if they had done an entire episode about, you know, Chernobyl. Too soon, I guess.
Too soon. But like you said, I think it's in the season 10 comics. There's a 2-part episode called Hosts, which we will get into the comics at some point. We will do those, because there's some really great stories, actually. They're not all canon anymore. Some of them still are, but not all of them are canon. But in the season 10 and 11 comics by Joe Harris are really good on the whole, and we'll get into those. And Hosts is he's the first non-mythology 2-parter they did, and that brings the Fluke Man back and does new things with it. And I think, if I remember rightly, gets more into Chernobyl. So
it does.
So that'll be interesting. Maybe you'll have to come back on, Clarence, for that one, and we can go into the sequel.
I don't know. The host has been permanently aligned with my participation on the X-Cast. I'm not sure what that says about me.
Could be worse. You could have been on Space, the episode about space. It could be worse.
Because then I would have thought that you'd have hated me.
Yeah, it's all right. I got one of my best friends to do that one because I hate him.
Okay, good.
It's fine.
That's the one with the white floating thing,
Yes,
right?
it's
Yeah,
terrible.
oh, God.
It
is awful.
It's the space mission where there's a ghost. There's a ghost on the ship, and it's really bad. It's terrible. I think we agreed in the final episode of season 1 that it was the worst episode of season 1. I think we all came to that conclusion. So yeah, it's Scully ends it with that nice, as we said at the beginning, that nice line, nature didn't make this thing, we did, which, as I say, is a much, much more interesting idea that they don't really do anything with. So it ends it on a nice little ooh moment, which the X-Files does do every now and then. It leaves you with a moral or philosophical idea, something a bit deeper for you to chew on. But sometimes you do wish that deepness had been in the episode itself.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, usually these things do have more thematic content, and this just kind of tosses it in at the end, and you wish that they had. I mean, it doesn't need to be heavy-handed. That didn't need to be the first episode, the first line of the episode.
Yeah.
But to have introduced that somewhere in between would have been a little bit more interesting to kind of go down that line.
I think I agree.
I don't know. Hindsight 2020. This is a perfectly good episode. I mean, it's better than good. It's a very good episode.
Yeah, it is.
That we have picked apart pretty ruthlessly.
No, we have. But if it's still good, even after we've picked all the silly little holes in it, then that shows that it's a good one.
Well, it comes from a place of affection, right?
Does.
I mean, we pick at it because it's a good episode, and we've seen it so many times. So.
Yeah, we can deconstruct it in that way. But yeah, it ends with the Fluke Man floating, half severed, underneath New Jersey, and then it opens its eyes and breathes. End. And then we do see it crop up once more in one of the episodes. I think it might be a Darren Morgan comedy, actually. But we see a National Enquirer headline where the Fluke Man is on it, in season 3. But I can't remember the episode. We will get there. But
that's right.
He does appear on a National Enquirer headline. Very just, it's a throwaway gag. But yeah, he's still out there.
You talked to Skinner yesterday.
Success in our work is imperative, Scully. Reinstatement of the X-Files must be undeniable.
That came from Skinner?
No. We have a friend in the FBI.
I thought you might be interested in the lab results on the biology of the fluke larva. Dissection and analysis indicates reproductive and physiological cross-trading, resulting in a sort of quasi-vertebrate human.
Human?
Yes, but still capable of spontaneous regeneration like any fluke or flatworm.
How does that happen?
Radiation, abnormal cell fusion, the suppression of natural genetic processes. Mulder, nature didn't make this thing. We did.
So yeah, that was The Host, a pretty solid episode which carries on season 2's good opening run, and I think it's a good one. It's a good one. We're going to skip the usual do you believe in section, because I don't think, Clarence, you do believe that Chernobyl can create worm monsters.
No, I do not believe that Chernobyl could create worm monsters.
So I really think we'd be wasting time trying to analyse that one. So what we're going to do is...
Well, I can tell you a funny story today.
Go on then.
So I should preface this with, my wife and I keep our house very, very clean. We're kind of neat freaks. But I went into microwave some breakfast this morning, and for some reason there were these, and I had just watched Fluke, which is weird, but there were these tiny, tiny, tiny microscopic little ants in my microwave. And at first I thought, should I be worried that there are ants in my microwave? Because if they can get in, microwaves can get out. But then I was really hungry, so I decided to go ahead and just microwave the food because it was on a plate, and I didn't think ants were going to get to it. And then when I opened the door, I was curious to see what would happen to the microwaved ants, and they were still alive. So then I wondered, is the microwave going to somehow create like mutant ants, and they're going to eat me alive? And this is what the X-Files has done to me, by the way. So
this feels like
there you go.
This does feel like the teaser to a season 11 episode of a man who microwaves ants while he's making breakfast, and then in the middle of the night, this giant ant just creeps. Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, I hope,
or the man.
Clarence, I do hope that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, that would be. I would. I would be grossed out and be unbelief. I'd probably die, but long before I'd be masticated by an ant, I would probably just die of just general disgustedness.
Yeah, just Well, if this is the last time we have you on the XCast because you've been eaten by a giant mutated ant, then it's been fun. I will say that it's been fun.
I'm very touched.
Okay, so are you ready for the most fun part of the episode, which is the X quiz?
It was very nice talking to you. Have a great day. Go ahead. Yes, I'm ready.
5 questions and a quote on the host. Okay, so here we go. I know you've been looking forward to this, so let's see how we get on. Question 1. Name the FBI agent at the beginning who relieves Mulder of the case, the wiretap case.
It's not Norman, is it?
No, that's the detective in the later scene.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, there's actually two. There's actually two, really. The agent who replaces him, and I have just looked this up because I'd forgotten he existed, was Agent Bozoff, which is a great name. But the agent who tells him Skinner is after him and takes him away is called Agent Brissantine, who we never see again. So I'm not surprised you don't remember his name. I think you'll get this one because we did talk about it. What at first does Dr. Zenzola tell Mulder she thinks the sewer worker is trying to get through seeing her after the attack?
Well, he's trying to get out of work on workman's comp because he made up this silly story about a python.
Yeah, a bogus disability claim, as she quite horribly called it. Bogus disability claim. Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay, well done. Off the grid. Question 3. What colour is the chair we see Mr. X sitting in when he calls Mulder?
What? You are a sad, sadistic little man.
There's no way to talk about Mr. X. That's horrible.
Let's see. It's FBI issue, so it would be either one of 2 colors. And I'm going to go with black.
What was your other one?
Brown.
It was red, unfortunately.
It was red.
Yeah.
Oh my God, but he must have been at home then.
Yeah. He's in an office. It looks like he's in an office with blinds because he turns. You see him turn from the chair, and then he turned like in Blofeld style with his back to the camera, and you briefly see he's sitting in a red leather chair. So there you go. That was a tricky one because you don't see the red for very long in that scene. So
how do you know I'm not colorblind?
I'd feel really bad if that's true now.
I'm not.
Question 4. The sewer director, Ray, claims the concrete pipe in the old part of the sewer is no bigger than how many inches?
20, 28? 26? Something like that? Late 20s?
I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you that because you're close. 24.
24.
I'm going to give you a point because you were in the area there. Yeah.
Take a point. I knew it was in the 20s.
That'll do. Round it red, do a number. Okay, question 5. What is the name of the campsite that the US Marshal pulls up at as the Fluke Man manages to escape?
Lake Betty's Nature Playground.
Lake Betty. There you go. Excellent. 3. That's all right. You're doing well. Finally, the quote. Okay, so ideally the name of the character and the scene and who they're talking to. Okay, here we go. 160,000 people a day call my office on the porcelain telephone.
Oh, that's Gray. And I thought it was 560,000, but I may be wrong. And it's when Mulder has come to the New Jersey sewer system to investigate. I'm not quite sure why he gets called there, but it's in the first scene where you're in the sewer system where they discover the monster.
Yeah. Absolutely. You may be right about that number, actually. I might have misheard him wrong. It might be. It's 560,000 probably sounds more accurate, actually.
Yeah, because I wrote it down, actually, because it is one of the quotes I wrote down.
Yeah. Yes, well done. I love the way he says porcelain telephone. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
More people should refer to the toilet as that. That's genius. But you've scored, Clarence, out of 6, you've scored 4. That's pretty good.
I can hang my head high. Hold my head high. I think that's better than I did last time.
I think so. I can't remember how you did last time, but I think
it was more like 2.
I think my questions were so fiendish they terrified you for about 6 months until you came on again. But no, you've done well. Excellent. Good stuff.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end then of this episode of the X-Cast. We're off and running on season 2, and it's been really lovely to have you back, Clarence. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Fluke Man with us.
Well, thanks so much, Tony, for having me back.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Until hopefully you return again on the show, which I hope you do down the road. Where can we find you online, and what are you up to?
Sure, I'm on Twitter at CHMoy, and you can find me at Awards Daily TV, as I mentioned before. We cover television and the Emmys. We're in the prime season of the American Emmys right now. And you can also find me as the host of the Water Cooler podcast, where we discuss various TV things. And we've talked about the X-Files, although with some non-X-File audience members, so they tend to be a little tougher on it than I am.
Than we are. They don't with good nature pull apart the Python and the and everything. We'll have to look that up. The Water Cooler podcast, excellent. That's one to check out. So Clarence hopefully will be back, as I say, and we'll be back next week to discuss Blood, the episode with subliminal messaging and a very, very, very intense actor who plays the main character. So until then, you can find us on Twitter at the X_cast, and you can email us at thexfcast@gmail.com if you want to drop any thoughts, and we're on Facebook at the Xcast as well. Do let us know what you think of the shows, what you think of the episodes, whether you're watching the X-Files right now. Just talk to us about the show in any way. That'd be awesome. And if you could leave us a review on iTunes, that'd be brilliant, because then we'll get even more known and more people will listen as we go into season 2. And if you really want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Mr_AJ_Black, and on Facebook at AJ Black if you want to see my associated ramblings, but they're not always X-Files based. So big thanks again, Clarence, for coming on.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week, but remember, as ever, trust no one.